Okay,
Ask her
just
some
what
questions.
I'm going to start July the 21st, 1938. That is the day that I met Cliff. And I met him at a skating rink. We were roller skating, and I was there at that skating rink that night. I had met Ken and Ruth and them about a few days before. And of course, Rousey Mae Diggs was telling me all about Cliff and Ken and all of them. The cutest Rousey boy, she said, she had met chopping cotton. And she said, I want you to meet him, but I don't want you to go with that Cliff because he's a smart aleck. And she told me, said, I'd met Ken first, and Cliff told Ken, said, I'm going to take your girlfriend. And Rosemary told me, said, if you won't go with him, I'll buy you a Coke. And I said, okay. And I didn't go with him that night. But the next night I did, and I never failed to see him every night then after that. But we were at this skating rink, and I was on the skating rink skating. And him and a friend of his, Buster Stanford, was standing up at the end, and Cliff had on a big chauffeur's cap like you wear when you drive trucks. He thought he was real cute in that, and he was. And he pushed his cap up like that. It's still just a picture today like he was then. I can just see him. And we just talked a little bit, but I just lived about a block from the skating rink, and when we walked home that night, him and Ken both walked me home that night from the skating rink. And of course then the next day they was all up there, and from then on, Ken, Cliff, Lewis, and Craigbaum, and Lonnie, and a bunch of them would come up to the house nearly every night, and they'd play music and sing, and Dad liked that, and Mother and them all liked Cliff. A lot of people Mama didn't like, but she liked them.
That's good.
Now, where did you live at that time?
We lived in Wayne, right at the southwest part, in an old two-story house. That's where we lived at that time. Okay, and then
Was that where Elwood and Sterling was born?
No, they
Purcell.
were born in Purcell.
Oh, in Purcell.
But I started to tell you before Cliff and I married, Mr. Rousey and them had an old 29 Buick car. And Grandpa had worked on that old car, the steering wheel. He had it turned backwards. If you pulled it to the right, it went to the left. You pulled it to the left, it went to the right. About 3 or 4 days after I'd met Cliff, we were picking cotton in Wayne. Dad had an old B-model truck, and we'd take it to the field as we picked cotton. We'd empty it into the truck, and he'd haul it to gin for the guy. But that day, Cliff and I decided they'd come to the field where we was picking cotton. And Grandma said, no, you can't take that car. You'll wreck it. You can't take that car. But he took the car anyway, and it was just about 3 miles up to Wayne. They lived north of Wayne. And they got up there, and they're coming out south of Wayne where we was picking cotton. Ott and Cliff was talking and laughing, I guess. And Cliff forgot his boat, pulled right instead of left. He pulled it the wrong way and flipped that old Buick over on his side. All of his gas leaked out. That was the bad part. And it was a farmer there close with a team, and he pulled the old car back up on its wheels. I don't remember how Cliff got on out to the field or whether we just came by and saw him. But anyway, it started to rain, and we was quitting picking coming back to town. And we got there, him and Otwa in that old Buick, no gas. So Dad hooked onto it to pull him back to town. And our old Buick weighed 4,000 pounds or something. It was real heavy. And we already had a load of cotton on the back of the truck, and all of us back there in the back on the cotton, Dad driving. And Cliff was stirring the car, of course. And Dad just a cussing up a stream. I could hear him up there in the front. That damn boy is just a riding the brakes. That old car was so heavy, and it was red muddy hills going up over them, getting the car back to town. Okay.
Now, at that time, your younger three sisters and brothers, what were their names and their birthdays?
My four younger
Four
ones.
younger.
Alice was just younger than me. I was 19 at the time, and she was about 16, I guess. Her birthday was February the 14th, and she was born in 1922. And then Bud was next. He was born November the 11th, 1924. And then Ozzy was born July the 31st, 1927. She was born in Arkansas. And then Pebble was born September the 18th, 1930. She was born at Wayne. I don't remember when Ozzy was born. I remember when
Where?
Bud was born and Ozzy's born, but I
When was Bud born?
I don't remember when Pebble was
No,
born.
Bud.
But
Yeah, she already said when he's born. He's born in,
and we lived at Wayne
Wayne.
then. But we had been
27,
to Arkansas and back. I told you about that
Yeah.
the other day. Was going to Arkansas and coming back. And Mama was pregnant at the time. Nellie was pregnant at the time.
Now, going back to your school age, tell it again. How many years did you go to grade school?
Rita, when I started to grade school when I was 6 years old out at Kreiner, we may have gone 3 or 4 weeks. I don't remember for sure because Dad moved around. He moved from here to there. And we'd go to Arkansas and then we'd come back. But when we went to school, we had no books, no nothing to study, no way. Very few clothes to wear. And we got very little schooling, all of us.
Then you went to 7th and 8th grade?
But when I went to this, I wasn't even going to school when I went to Lola. None of us were. We lived out west of Wayne, and I don't know why, but we just wasn't none of us in school. We didn't have books or no nothing if we couldn't borrow a book to study. And the other kids later on went to school in Wayne, but when I went to Lola's to stay and take care of the kids, because she was sick, they started me at school in February. That must have been February 1936, because I went to in the 7th grade through 36, and then I went back down there in the fall of 37. And went in the 8th grade in it was 35.
And you were 17?
Yeah, I was 17. Anyhow, it must have been 35 because when I graduated from the 8th grade,
With honors?
it was in 37, 38, about 36, 37, I don't remember. But anyhow, when I came back home then when school was out.
But you graduated with high honors, right?
I did. I was valedictorian in my class, and I got all kinds of certificates. I got a spelling certificate.
Wow.
I didn't miss a word of spelling for 5 months.
That
Can
is
you
awesome.
imagine? I can hardly spell my name, but I studied.
But especially since you didn't go to
I
grade
studied
school. Yeah.
real hard, but I was real good in arithmetic. So then in the fall of 37 is when I started high school at Wayne.
Uh-huh.
And I went to school that whole year. Dad didn't make me stay out and pick cotton. All the rest of them did. They stayed out and picked cotton, but I got to go to school. I went to school the 9th grade all year, and I got a few honors at high school, but not like I did in our grade school. Grade school, I was kind of the top dog there.
Top dog.
So what year did you marry Cliff?
And then I told you I met him on
What-
July the 21st, 1938. We went together, we married September the 28th, 1938.
38.
I knew him 2 months and a week, I think, when we got married. And they say, you better know people before you marry them. I knew him after about 10 years.
Yeah, then you had 2 kids, huh?
When we got married then, we went to West Texas, out by Lubbock, to pull bowls. We went out there in October 1938. The place we went was Tig's Farm. This is a big farmer. They went out every year and pulled bowls out there. We pulled bowls and we'd go to field, I guess, by daylight nearly, because when we pulled bowls, I'd pull 800, he'd pull 1,000 pounds. Me and him would pull 1,800 pounds of bowls a day. Of
Wow.
course, Grandpa pulled bowls too, and
Yeah.
Grandma went when she wanted to, not very often. She
Do you remember how much you got per pound?
We got $1 for 300.
300 pounds.
You
Wow.
pull 300 for $1. That's how much we got for pulling the bowls. And that was pretty good money
Yeah.
then. We pulled bowls. We stayed out West Texas until December, till the bowls were all out, and then we went back to Purcell. We lived in Purcell then. And the next spring, we'd work out in the field. But Cliff went to wheat harvest that year up to Kansas to work in the wheat harvest. And on my birthday, July the 11th, Cliff was gone, Kansas. Ott and Claude and Ike whipped me for my birthday. They took the strap. Grandma and Grandpa's
You
gone
never
to
forget
town.
that, will you?
And
I'm gonna
them
hit the back
3
out.
boys
Okay.
I gotta go number 2.
took a strap and whipped me for my birthday. Oh, I fought him like a tiger, but I did get a birthday whipping anyhow. But Grandma sure got them when she got back. Grandma always took up for me. And then when Cliff come home from wheat harvest, we still lived there in Purcell. He worked at first one job and then another, and Grandpa did too. But then when that WPA started, it started in about 36, I think. And after that, things got just a little better because people could work and make a little bit of money to live on. And Cliff worked at it a while. He worked in a place where they give away commodities, they called it, foods, like they do now, but I don't remember what kind. But he gave away shoes and clothes is what he did, issued to people that come in to get shoes. And most of the shoes they had to give away, he said, was great big old shoes. And that's what he worked at until fall. And of course, we picked cotton and pulled bowls again. That year, we didn't go to West Texas. We stayed there. We lived in Purcell when Elwood was born. We lived down on South Canadian Street, down south part of town.
And what year was that?
40.
1940. Elwood was born May the 7th in 1940. And we worked on the farms here and there, around Wayne and everywhere, until in the spring of 1940. Oh, I got to tell you about where we were at Pearl Harbor Day. That fall, we went to Memphis, Texas, to pull bowls, pick cotton. We lived way out in the country and out west of Memphis, and just a little house. For heat and to cook with, you couldn't get wood. There's no wood there. We burned cow chips. We went out in the field, picked them up with a bag, the dry cow chips. That's what we used for heat and to cook.
Did it smell like cow chips?
Well, I guess it did. I don't remember. If it did, it was so many smells. I don't remember it smelling like that. But that's what the people used, the working people. We picked cotton out there and we'd go to town every Saturday. Saturday at noon, everybody went to town. And we'd have a hamburger or something like that. And that Elwood, he loved hamburgers. We went to a big cafe to eat one Saturday afternoon. They didn't make hamburgers. So Grandma ordered Elwood a piece of egg custard and put up in his high chair. And when she set that egg custard in front of him, he thought he was going to get a hamburger. And he took his fork and he just cut that old egg custard to pieces. He didn't take a bite.
Didn't take a bite.
Grandma and Grandpa just petted him to death. He was the apple of their eye. And then we were picking cotton on Sunday morning, December the 7th, 1941, out in the field. We were out there by daylight picking cotton. Of course, Grandma kept Elwood at the house, took care of him. And this farmer came out and told us, said, about Pearl Harbor, said, well, just roll up your sacks and quit. So we did quit and go to the house. I don't remember. In a few days, we went back to Oklahoma. We just expected, just like everybody else, we didn't know what was going to happen. But we stayed in Purcell. We lived in Purcell. We lived in Oklahoma City. And then we were back at Purcell when Sterling and Junior and Alan was born.
And what's their birthdays?
We lived down south part of town in Purcell. And then Cliff was working at the naval base at Norman. They'd begin to get a whole lot of jobs for the war part. And all the young men was having to register and to go. And anyway, we lived in this big house there.
What was Sterling and Alan and Junior's birthday?
Alan Lee, Margaret and Ken lived out in the country, but they'd come up to our house in Purcell, and she got sick up there, and she had Alan there in this house. He was born November the 9th, 1942, and then they were still there with us. I don't know whether they moved up there in the house with us all or whether they just had come up quite often. But Margaret did laundry. She did the most beautiful white diapers you ever saw. Them kids all had pretty white diapers to wear. And then Junior was born December the 9th, 1942, there in that big house. And I was so surprised. Grandma had told us all she was pregnant, but she didn't look like it. She was big anyhow.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I was really surprised she had Junior. And then, of course, Ken worked in a garage up there. He'd come home for lunch every day. Grandpa and Cliff worked at Naval Base, so they didn't come home till night. But Ken would come home for lunch. About 11:30, I'd say, Margaret, you better quit your wash and cook Ken's lunch. Better cook Ken some lunch. Ken would come home at 12, and she still hadn't quit to cook him any lunch. And maybe he'd fry an egg and some bacon, or I'd cook him something.
Not Margaret
But
fixing
Margaret,
lunch. Oh.
I guess she loved the washing. She did the most beautiful washing.
She was good at that.
Anyway, we all lived there in the house. And then Sterling was born there at the same place, January the 17th, 1943. I don't remember how long we still lived there, but anyhow, Ken was drafted and had to go in service. Ott had to go in service. And Cliff didn't, of course. We had the two kids. And as long as he'd still on a war job. During this time for Sterling's barn, we went to Arizona to copper mines. We took Nellie in 1942 in May. We were on the road going to Arizona. Bert was out there working copper mines, and he had an old Chevrolet car, one seat, with something up on the back. So he wanted us to drive Cliff to drive the car and take Nellie and the kids to him in Arizona. She had the three kids. Elwood had his birthday May the 7th while we were on the road going out there. Otis Wayne, Cletus, and Ted, and Elwood, and Nellie, and me, and Cliff was on this little old one-seated car pulling a trailer behind it, going to Globe, Miami, Arizona, to the copper mines. When we were out there, I got ahead with my other story about the kids being. I was pregnant with Sterling at the time when we went out there. Going across that big bridge, the Coolidge Dam out there in Arizona somewhere, I'm not sure just where it was at. You went down a long hill like that. There was no brakes on that old car.
Oh, no.
Cliff had to use the gear to gear it down to stop. And we went down this long grade to the bridge, and there stood an army guy with a big rifle. They were guarding the bridges during the war. And we didn't have any brakes. And Cliff had that old car geared down, and he finally got it to stop. But do you know, that guy didn't think we was going to hit there, that rifle. He thought we was doing that on purpose to blow up the bridge.
Yeah.
So we got that stopped. And that guy got on our fender, held on the fender, and rode across the bridge with us. And then there was another in there to take his place. He rode the next car back. They guarded that bridge. When we got to Miami and Globe, of course, Bert had a house ready then. And Cliff went to work at the copper mine. He went to work in the mill on top where there was the big mill was dividing the copper from whatever, water in his big blades that went around and around like that. He went to work in that, and we rented a little house way up on top of a hill. You couldn't get your car up there. It was 122 steps.
Oh.
Wow.
Going up this way, up to, and we had to park our car way down here at the bottom. Good thing we didn't have any furniture anyway. anyway, that's where we lived there in Miami. And when it rained out there, it was rock. And it'd flood the streets, the water would just run off the street. He bought me a little bitty pot flower in a coffee can at the store and brought it home. And I was going to repot it and put it in more dirt. I got out in the yard and you couldn't find no dirt.
Oh,
It was all rock and gravel. I couldn't
No
find
dirt out there, never.
I couldn't find enough of dirt to put in my little plant. Anyway, we got out there in May when he went to work. Grandma and Grandpa and Junior came out in July, left Oklahoma and came to us and out there, and they moved in with us. This old lady we'd rented this house from let us have it real cheap so Cliff would fix it up for her. Grandma and Grandpa and Ott. Ott went to work in the company store, in a big grocery store. They had a big store there. You could buy anything, charge it, as long as you worked for Miami Copper. And you could charge everything and work. And Grandpa went to work at the crusher. He worked in the crusher there at the mine. And Bert worked down underground. He was 1,000 foot down or whatever, I don't remember. When he was working there, he lost one of his fingers. He said, I always believed he did it on purpose to get money out of it. He'd do anything. Anyway, we stayed there until July the 4th. Grandma and them came out after that. I don't remember just when. But all the Harpers worked out there too. Tom Harper and Mabel. They were out there working. And on the 4th of July, we wanted to go back to Oklahoma to see Miss Rousey and them then. And they wouldn't let Cliff off. So him and Tom, neither one of them could get off work there. So they took the 3-day weekend and we went to Oklahoma. Of course, we didn't get back on time. Cliff told them that me being pregnant, I got sick and they couldn't make it back on time. I think we were 2 or 3 days later getting back. Tom had an old car, some kind, I don't know. But they both drove and they'd hold that old car on 90 miles an hour. That's the way people used to drive then. Anyhow, we went to Oklahoma to see Grandma and them. And then, of course, after we went back, Grandma and Grandpa and them came out right after that to Arizona. And then, about a month later, I think, Henry and Phoebe and all their kids came to our house. You imagine what the old lady did about the house. She kicked us out. I don't know where we went to then, but she kicked us out.
Too many people in the house, huh?
And then Henry and Phoebe and them went back to Stanford where they raised cotton. I don't think Henry ever went to work at the copper mine. They went back to the farming part about 100 miles east of there, or 200 or something. I don't remember. And the Vaughns, those people that I told you about, the old lady and the old man, they had gone to Arizona, out to the Stanford to pick cotton. They had left there. And later, one of my cousins met one of them Vaughn boys there somewhere, and she married him. They didn't live together very long, but they had a boy, and she divorced him, and then she married another guy. They had a bunch of kids, but that was another story. I didn't know that time. But in the fall then, Mr. Rousey and Cliff and all of us, I don't know who, decided to go back to Oklahoma. We left the copper mines. Cliff was supposed to be frozen on the job, him, Mr. Rousey. You know how it was during the war. You couldn't quit a government job. you were frozen on the job. You worked 7 days a week. Your shift, if they needed you more, you pulled a 16-hour shift. And they quit. We went back to Oklahoma. We went to Oklahoma City. I don't remember how long we lived there. And then we moved down to Purcell. But again, while we was there at Purcell then, Cliff worked in garages, first one thing, another, and Grandpa always had his check, so a lot of time, we never worried about a job because he got his check. We lived with Grandma and Grandpa. Anyway, then we moved to Oklahoma City in, must have been 43 or 44. And Cliff went to work at Douglas Plant. And after that, I went to work at Douglas Plant. Margaret, Ken was in service, and Alt was in service. Grandpa and Margaret went to work at Douglas Plant. They worked day shift. Me and Cliff worked swing shift. And Grandma kept the kids, of course. All of them, Margaret's and mine, all of the kids. And we were working there. Cliff decided he'd quit the Douglas Plant. He was froze on job all right, but he had headaches, sinus headaches. His head would just swell up, and that air conditioning in the plant, the doctor said, he just had severe headache. So he quit. And he knew he couldn't get called to service then because he quit. So he wanted to get into the flying cadets. He went up and took the test and tried to get into the flying cadets in the Air Force. And he didn't pass because he didn't have a high school education. But he just liked a few points passing. And they told him just go back home and study and come back and try it again. But in the meantime, he was just pretty sure the Army was going to call him, so he joined the Navy. Dad, when he made up his mind to do anything, he just about did it with me and Grandma objecting to it. But he did. But we lived at Purcell at that time. So then when he left for the Navy, he left just before Christmas in 1944, and we lived at Purcell. I went down and got my driver's license the day before he left, and next morning he left. I put the kids in the car to go to Wayne, and it was snowing, and the road was slick with snow and ice, and I drove to Wayne to Mama's, and then I stayed with them, Mom and Dad, and she kept my kids, and I worked at Douglas. I'd ride to work. A lot of times I worked swing shift, but a lot of times I had to pull a 16-hour shift. And when I had to pull a late shift, then when I got off of morning, I'd go out to Grandma Rousey's. They still lived in the city, and him and Margaret was working at Douglas Plant. So I'd stay up at Grandma's some, and she'd keep the kids, or I'd stay down at Mama's and work, and she kept them. And in April the 13th or 11th or something, I can't remember. I used to remember, but I don't. When they had that bad cyclone that hit Oklahoma City, Dad was home on leave, and we lived on Southeast 29th Street out toward Douglas Plant. And that thing hit about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We just got home from town. That storm missed us a quarter of a mile on the south. It blowed down oil well derricks down. Wow. But then when all the sirens went off and everything, we didn't think about it was a storm. We thought somebody had had a wreck out toward it was shift time to change at 3:30. and Grandpa and Margaret was getting off work. We thought somebody had a wreck out there. So me and Cliff jumped in the car and went out east on Southeast 29th. Just a half a mile, the storm had hit and swept everything. But it didn't hurt too many people because it was shift change at Douglas. Everybody had got there to go to work. The ones that was getting off hadn't left yet.
Yeah.
So they weren't on the road there when it hit. And you know what? That didn't kill anybody, but it tore the houses, it killed the cattle. We saw a big telephone pole that straw had blown through that telephone pole
Yeah.
like that.
Wow.
And it was
They're bad when they go through there.
Dixie, going back to when Grandma Rousey and you guys used to take care of the kids, one of you, and tell a little bit of that.
When Junior and Sterling and Alan was all babies and we all lived there in that house together. I told you Margaret liked to wash clothes. She spent a lot of time washing clothes. We'd think Alan would be hungry, you know. He's this little fat thing, the fattest thing you ever saw. If me and Grandma would try to get Margaret to stop and go let the baby nurse, we all nursed the babies, and we'd try to get Margaret to stop, go nurse Alan, and he'd just be crying, and she wouldn't, and I'd slip Alan into the back room and let him nurse. And when I'd come back out, he'd just be so happy.
That's good.
We are probably in about,
Had I gotten to about the kids, when the three babies were little, Sterling and Alan and Junior, Grandma and Grandpa, and all of us lived in the same house. That's just about the time Ken went into service. And during the day, me and Margaret would be real busy washing clothes or hanging them. It was so cold, we'd go out to hang clothes. Grandma would take care of the three babies. She'd sit in her big chair and hold all of the three babies. And she'd let one nurse and then another nurse, just like she had twins. They was all that close together. And then after Ken went to service, I don't remember where Margaret moved to. She stayed with us a lot, and I know when we moved to Oklahoma City, she moved up in a little house right close to us, and Grandma took care of Alan, and Margaret worked at Douglas plant. Grandpa worked at Douglas, I worked at Douglas, and Cliff worked at Douglas. And a little later,
Now, when did
we all moved back to Purcell, and I can't remember just where.
When did we all come to California now?
And then when Cliff was stationed out at Port Hueneme, I decided to go to California. When I came out, Grandma and Grandpa came with me, and Rousey came to California with me. We came to Phoebe's and Henry Sullivan's at Tipton and picked cotton and lived in cotton picking shacks. And we were living at Wasco when Cliff came home from service. But when he was in service in Okinawa, Ken was on Okinawa in the Air Force.
Army.
And
He was in the Army.
yeah, Ken was in the Air Force. Engineers, well, the Army engineers.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, he built runways. He went in with the Marines. He built the airports as the Marines did the fighting. And Ken was on Okinawa. We didn't know it at home. Cliff didn't know it, but he wrote Ken a letter and told him, when you get my letter, if you know where I'm at, where I think you're at, you come see me. So Ken got the letter one day. It didn't even leave Okinawa. It just went over on the other side of the island. And Ken got up about 3 o'clock in the morning, walked across that island by himself, and went over and looked up Cliff's CB base where he was stationed. And he went in the tent and turned Cliff's caught over before he even knew Ken was there. And they got to visit a lot on Okinawa, and they had Christmas dinner together. Where Cliff was in the Seabees, they had plenty of food. Where Ken was at his army base, they were on K ration. So Ken would go over and eat with Cliff anytime he could. But then Ken came home. He got enough of points after the war was over. He came home quite a while before Cliff did. But Cliff got home February the 7th in 46. I want to tell you about, we had been living out on the Pozo Ranch in Wasco in a army housing. The last letter I had sent to Cliff. So when he came home and got this, then none of us had telephones or no nothing to get in touch. When he got discharged in Southern California, whatever base, I don't recall. Anyhow, he caught the bus to Bakersfield. Then when he got to Bakersfield, it was about 8 o'clock at night, and it was no bus out to Wasco, so he was highwaying it. And a boy came by in a car and picked him up, and Cliff told him where he thought he was going, to the Pozo Ranch at Wasco. That's where he had heard from us last. So the boy said, yes, my dad used to work there on that ranch. I'll take you out there. So he took him out there that night, and it was after dark, and they was driving around. Old Cliff knew to look for our car. He said, just look for my 41 DeSoto. That's the only way I know to find them. So they drove all around on the ranch, and they didn't. And that boy told him, there's another labor camp over by Shafter. We'll go over there and look. And they went over there, and about 9:30 that night, Cliff found his car sitting out. And that's the way he found us. That boy had taken him around to hunt us. And now, when we go anywhere now, we've all got our cell phones. We get in touch with people everywhere.
Yeah.
Back then,
You didn't
you
know.
didn't know. You
Yeah.
couldn't call nobody. You couldn't do
When'd you
nothing.
move to Carmen?
Pardon?
When'd you move to Carmen?
Then we moved to Kerman, and Virgil and Velma had a house in Kerman. They were cousins. And we came to see them in Kerman in about May or June 1946. And we came up there, and they had lots. So we decided to buy lots in Kerman. We bought 2 lots, and Grandpa bought 1 lot, and Aunt bought 1 lot, and Virgil had a house down on the corner. And we moved to Kerman and put up a big tent, a 16 by 16 tent, and had it walled up at the bottom all around. And Grandma and Grandpa and me and Cliff and our 2 kids and Junior lived in that tent. Then we went back to Oklahoma to come back out then. And Nine Zoo come back with us. We all lived in that tent. Then Virgil got the big idea. He sold his house. Gonna go to Oklahoma. When he sold his house, Thelma didn't want to go to Oklahoma. So they moved in the tent with us.
So how many did you have in
Virgil and Thelma and Judy.
there? Wow.
Judy was born June, I don't know what day, in 1946. We lived there. And Cliff went to work at the Ford place. He didn't like to pick cotton. Grandpa picked cotton. I was pregnant with the twins. And Cliff went to work the 12th of November, 1946, at the Ford place in Kerman. And Virgil was working at the Ford place. That's how Cliff got the job working there. And then when Thelma wouldn't go to Oklahoma, she wanted one of our lots. So Cliff sold Virgil one of our lots. And he built the house for Virgil. He was supposed to build Virgil a house for Virgil to furnish some money then for us to build our first little house. Of course, Cliff got Virgil's house built. That was the end of that part. And then we still lived in the tent, and Cliff started working on our house. And he built the first little 2-room. In the meantime, I think him and Grandpa built a little house on Grandpa, what was supposed to be the garage. And they lived in that.
A little one.
And Dad helped Grandpa build his house. And Ott, I don't think ever built a house on his. Ott sold his lot to Margaret and Ken.
Yeah.
And Margaret and Ken lived there a little while. I don't remember who they sold it to.
Right.
But then Grandpa and Grandma lived there.
What?
And Virgil and Thelma lived between them and us. We lived on the corner lot.
Right.
Dad built our house. The first room's in the back. And we moved in them. And then he began to work on the front part. We lived in those 2 little
You
rooms
can go down
for
30
about
down
2
there.
years.
Hold
He
on a
got the
second.
big house built where we could move into it just before Gary was born. Gary was born June the 11th, 1949.
Oh, I see you.
And we
Yeah.
moved into
Okay.
the big house just before Gary was born. And we all lived there, and I think I've told you enough of the story. From then on, it was better. Cliff worked at the Ford place,
Yeah.
and then Virgil sold his other house, the one Cliff had built for him. He sold it. And they did go to Oklahoma that time. And that house was between ours and Grandma's.
Is it on? No, it's on.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'll go back just a little bit and tell you about when Rondon was born.
Jim, come over
We
here.
lived in the tent, so many of us you can't imagine. In January it was cold and it was foggy and we didn't have a car. And Ernie Miller, that's just for him and Wanda Bell got married, they made Clifford talk to Ernie, and when I got sick, Ernie is supposed to bring us to Madeira to Dearborn Hospital. About 5 o'clock in the morning, it was so foggy you couldn't see your hand in front of your face when I got sick. And Ernie came over and brought us to the hospital, Dearborn, the old Dearborn Hospital in Madeira. And Rondon was born January the 10th, the first twins that was born in Madera County in 1947. And they were born, Doug was born 5 minutes till 9, Ron 5 minutes after 9 on January 10th, 1947. We all still lived in the tent at Curtin during that time. Now, later I've told you about Gary in our house, and I'll tell you more next time.
Okay.
Okay.